Nolan Mercer said it like a joke. Soft, bored, entitled. But the room tightened anyway. Avery felt it in the air first. The micro shift of bodies, the sudden stillness of cutlery, the way laughter died on contact with silence. She stood at the edge of the long table in the Crown Suite with a silver tray braced against her ribs. The Halcyon Hotel's members-only dining room looked like money pretending to be art. Cream walls, muted gold, a view of Central Park that didn't feel real. Every chair was occupied by people who were used to taking up space. The black folder lay open beside Nolan's glass. Dense lines of writing ran across the page in another language, elegant and compact, the kind of text that didn't waste ink. A pen sat beside it, heavy, lacquered, too expensive to be a hotel prop. A cuffed briefcase rested near a man with a senator's haircut, the metal chain wrapped once around his wrist like a reminder. Avery kept her shoulders slightly rounded, her eyes lowered, the posture of someone who apologized without speaking. Nolan leaned back, smirk sharp as a blade. He had the kind of face that magazines called controlled, like control was an aesthetic choice. His assistant, slick hair, watch that caught the chandelier light, hovered behind him with a frozen smile. "Come on," Nolan said, tapping the page with one finger. "Just one line. Read it in English." A woman in pearls laughed under her breath. Not loud, not kind. A man beside her murmured, "This should be good," like he was ordering dessert. Avery's throat went dry. She could feel the head of security behind her, close enough that she didn't need to look to know where he stood. He didn't smell like cologne. He smelled like clean fabric and decisions. "Sir," Avery said softly, letting the word land small. "I'm not—" "Oh, I know what you are." Nolan's smile widened. "You're staff. You pour water. You nod. You disappear. That's what makes this fun. No pressure." The pearl woman lifted her glass, eyes scanning Avery's name tag like it offended her. "If she can't do it," she said, "she can always try again, slowly, like in those videos." A few polite laughs, the kind of laughs people offered to stay in the group. Avery's fingers tightened around the tray's edge. Her pulse hit the inside of her wrists. She let her face show hesitation, then embarrassment, then a faint tremor. Performance is armor. Nolan's assistant leaned closer and whispered something into his ear. Nolan's gaze didn't move. The smirk stayed. "Do it," he said. "One line. If you can translate one line, I'll tip you 10 grand. If you can't—" His eyes flicked to the head of security, then back. "You'll go home early, and we'll find someone more useful." Home early sounded like mercy. In this building, it wasn't. Avery lowered her eyes to the page. She didn't need to translate the entire document. She didn't need to prove anything. She needed one sentence, one that would change the temperature of the room. Her gaze tracked the language with a speed she refused to show. She found the polite openings, the harmless clauses, the filler meant to distract. Then she found the blade hidden in the velvet, short, precise, unmistakable. Avery drew a breath that looked shaky and felt steady. She read clearly. "Upon signature, the undersigned authorizes the immediate termination of Nolan Mercer and the transfer of all voting control to Row Capital, effective tonight." For a half-second, nobody moved. It wasn't disbelief. It was recognition. The pearl woman's glass hovered near her mouth, her hands suddenly rigid. One of the men at the table blinked hard, like his eyes wanted to reject what they'd just heard. The senator-haired man's chain hand twitched once, metal clicking softly against leather. Nolan's smirk fell off his face like a mask. He leaned forward, slow and careful, as if sudden motion might trigger something. His voice dropped to a low, flat line. "Now read that again." Avery repeated it without changing a word. The room didn't fill with noise. It emptied of it. Even the distant piano from the lounge outside seemed to fade, as if the building itself was listening. The head of security shifted behind her, one measured step that carried meaning. His eyes weren't on Avery anymore. They were on the people at the table, counting hands, reading shoulders, mapping threat. Nolan's fingers brushed the edge of the folder. He didn't snatch it. He didn't tear it. He looked at it like it had betrayed him. Then he looked at Avery, not amused, not mocking, awake. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked. Avery lifted her eyes just enough to meet his, keeping the rest of her face calm. "I read," she said. A laugh tried to rise from somewhere in the middle of the table. It died when it met the silence. The Pearl woman set her glass down with surgical care. "That's not what it says," she snapped too fast. Nolan's gaze flicked to her, then to the senator-haired man, then back to Avery. His voice stayed quiet, but something in it turned sharp. "Is she lying?" he asked the room. No one answered. That was the answer. Avery felt the security chief's presence tighten, like a cable being pulled. The man's voice cut through the silence, controlled and low. "Sir, we should end this meeting." Nolan didn't look away from Avery. "No," he said. "Now, we're having the real one." The air changed. Not louder, colder. The kind of cold that came from doors locking without anyone touching them. Avery's pulse hammered behind her ribs, but her hands didn't shake. She kept the tray pressed to her body like it belonged there. Like she belonged there. Because 2 hours earlier, she had been invisible. She had entered through the staff door on 59th Street with rainwater clinging to the hem of her black uniform. The halcyon rose above her, like a fortress built of glass and quiet money. Inside, the corridor smelled of citrus polish and fresh linen. Cameras watched everything, but they watched the staff the way people watched furniture, until the furniture moved wrong. Trent, the floor manager, met her by the linen closet, clipboard in hand, face shiny with stress. "You're late," he hissed. "It's raining," Avery said. "That's not an excuse here." He shoved a stack of folded napkins into her hands like a punishment. "Listen, tonight is high profile. You don't make eye contact. You don't talk unless spoken to. You don't improvise." Avery nodded. Trent's eyes narrowed, like calm made him nervous. "The Mercer party is in the Crown Suite." She kept her expression blank. The name still hit like pressure. Trent lowered his voice. "And our interpreter canceled." Avery felt the words settle in her stomach, heavy as a coin. "They're meeting with people who don't like surprises," Trent continued. "Mercer's assistant asked if we have anyone who can handle language. I told her no, obviously." Avery's mouth stayed neutral. Obviously. Trent exhaled hard. "You're going in for water service. That's it. You pour, you leave, you keep your head down." Avery hesitated just long enough to look obedient. "Why me?" Trent gave her a tight smile. "Because you don't talk," he said. "And because you look like you can take a joke." Avery swallowed, and she didn't correct him. She crossed the Meridian's lounge, past velvet chairs and low voices and wristwatches worth more than her car. A woman at the bar glanced at Avery's name tag and scoffed, loud enough to be heard. "Avery," the woman said, dragging the name like it tasted cheap. "Adorable. They really let anyone in the hallway now." Her friends laughed politely. Avery kept walking. A server brushed past her and murmured without moving her lips, "Don't get stuck in there." Avery didn't turn her head. "Why?" The server's eyes flicked toward the guards by the restricted corridor. "Because people don't come back the same." At the Crown Suite door, a guard scanned her keycard, then scanned her face like he was checking her against a list she'd never see. The lock clicked. The door opened. The guard didn't say welcome. He stepped aside like he was sending her into weather. Avery entered with her tray balanced perfectly, shoulders small, eyes lowered. At the far end of the room, Nolan Mercer laughed at something a man in a suit whispered. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was the sound of a man enjoying the fact that everyone else needed him. Avery poured water, silent as instructed. Then Nolan's assistant glanced at her and said, just loud enough to carry, "Is she the one?" Nolan's gaze slid to Avery. That smirk appeared. Sharp, confident, already cruel. He tapped the black folder once with his finger and said, "Perfect." Then, without raising his voice, he added, "Bring her closer." Avery felt the room lean toward her, as if the air itself wanted front row seats. Nolan Mercer didn't raise his voice, didn't snap his fingers, didn't need to. His assistant moved first, stepping around the table with a practiced smile and a hand held out like she was guiding Avery onto a stage. "Right here," the assistant said sweetly. "Mr. Mercer just wants to clear up a small misunderstanding." Avery walked closer with her tray, shoulders still tucked inward, eyes lowered. The perfect shape of compliant staff. She could feel the Pearl Woman's gaze crawling over her uniform like lint, could feel the quiet amusement of men who thought humiliation was a harmless sport. Nolan watched her approach the way people watched a lock being picked. Interested, confident, it would break. Name tag says Avery, he said. That your real name? Yes, sir, she answered and kept the word small. Nolan's eyes flicked to the folder again. We're having a meeting, adults only. It's not for staff entertainment, he said, and the table offered polite agreement even though he had been the one to invite the spectacle. And yet, the Pearl Woman murmured, here we are. Someone chuckled. Nolan's assistant placed a clean glass in front of Avery like a prop. Water, she instructed. Avery poured. The sound of it, thin, controlled, felt too loud in the quiet. A man with a silver tie pin slid his phone across the table toward the assistant without being asked. Another followed. Avery clocked it. Not etiquette, protocol. No cameras, no recordings, no mistakes that could survive daylight. A guard at the door held a small velvet tray and collected devices with the same calm you'd use for weapons. Nolan noticed Avery noticing and smiled as if it pleased him. You're observant, he said. That's a rare trait in this room. The Pearl Woman's lips curved. Or she's nosy. There's a difference. Nolan ignored her and gestured at the folder. Interpreter canceled. Apparently, that's the only person on Earth who can read a page in another language, and he said. My assistant claims you can. The assistant's smile didn't change, but Avery saw the tension under it, the flicker of a problem she'd failed to solve. I didn't say she could, the assistant replied. I said she might. Nolan tilted his head. What's your background, Avery? Service, Avery said more mostly. Mostly, Nolan repeated, amused. That's a careful answer. Across the table, the senator-haired man finally spoke. His voice had the tone of a man used to being listened to even when he whispered. We're on a timeline, he said. This is not the moment for games. Nolan's eyes never left Avery. It's always the moment for games, he replied. That's how you learn what people are. The senator-haired man's cuffed briefcase clinked softly as he shifted his wrist. The sound made Avery's stomach tighten. Handcuffs weren't fashion. They were insurance. Nolan's assistant leaned in and lowered her voice. But it still carried to Avery because the room was built for secrecy, not acoustics. Mr. Mercer, please, we can't risk... Risk what? Nolan asked. That the waitress understands more than she should? He let the word waitress land on Avery like a label, then turned it into a prize. Here's the deal, he said, addressing the table like a host. If she can translate a single sentence cleanly, I'll donate $50,000 to whatever charity Ms. Rowe pretends to care about this quarter. The Pearl Woman's eyes flashed, and Avery learned something important. The Pearl Woman wasn't a guest. She was a stakeholder. And if she can't, the woman asked, voice syrupy.